of the... Thank you for that interruption. Welcome to the last meeting of the triennium of the Civil Defence Emergency Group. There are, of course, special statutory provisions for what happens during what I call interregnum, before the new committee is appointed, and Clinton will be covering those in his address later. Before we start, I have to remind you that the meeting is being recorded and that the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to elected members, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. And I'm required by my legal department to read that out to you, but here ends the lesson. I'd like to welcome Jackie Sinko and Lily Folds to the meeting. Jackie, this is her first time she's actually managed to appear in public, and it could be the last one, but it may not be the last one. And also, Lily is potentially taken out, could be, but may not be. But I'll leave them to cover their deck chair arrangements during their presentation. I'd also like to welcome Mayor Webber and Commissioner Bill Wosley, both online. We've got apologies from Mayor Steve Chadwick. We don't have an alternate, do we? We've got an interim apology from Deputy Mayor Donaldson, who is having IT issues, and we've also got apologies from Commissioner Anne Tolley, and Bill Wosley is, of course, replacing or standing in for her. So, can I have a movement that we accept those apologies? Mayor Campbell, thank you. Seconded by Mayor Rister, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Carried. I should also mention, of course, this is the first meeting where Reuben Fraser, who is sitting behind on my left, Reuben Fraser has just taken out from Sarah Osmondson as the General Manager of Regulatory Services at the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and is therefore the person responsible for civil defence, the staff member responsible for civil defence in the Bay of Plenty. Of course, Clinton is, as you know, his position, but of course he is in an anomalous position in that he works with the Bay of Plenty, but is not actually the Bay of Plenty. Sort of. Yeah, but we can work through that one.
We know that.
Yeah, right. Okay. Public forum is not advised. Items not on the agenda, none advised. Order of business, none advised. Declarations of any conflicts of interest. None. Thank you. Public excluded to be transferred into the open. There is none. So, and now we go to item 7.1 on page 6. The Emergency Management Group Joint Committee meetings of the 8th of July. I have just one matter arising in that I was tasked with inviting the Minister to invite him to this meeting. He has declined due to his other commitments. So I would suggest in the new triennium, whoever is in this chair writes again, and once he gets better settled into his new appointment, it will perhaps have more chance of getting them here. But I think we are in many ways the exemplar for CDEMG, from what I've been told in New Zealand, and therefore I think it's important that the Minister should attend here and find out what we do and how we do it and who the people are who do it. So, other than that, are there any other matters arising from those minutes? So, moved by Mayor Turner, seconded by Mayor Campbell. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. Right, we now move to item 8.1, page 15, Bay of Plenty Group Annual Plan Dashboard as at the 5th of September. Please.
Chair,
I'll take the dashboard as given, as read there, and after that, members have been briefed by the individual staff around their own individual tracking. At the moment, it's looking good. It's green. The slight yellows aren't really concerning at this point. They often are issues beyond our control. Sort of we're waiting on others. And pleasing to see quite a few of the blues, where meaning we're completing projects across the councils already. Quite a few blues are coming on the board. So I don't have anything particular to flag with this committee in terms of that. I think the group is tracking well.
Do any of the members questions to ask Clinton about the traffic light? Anything online? Anything on Zoom? No, right. Thank you. Right. We come on to move the receipt of the report. Third, Campbell, say aye.
Aye.
Page 8.2, budget update. Clinton, over to you again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members, at the last meeting, this committee approved the group annual plan for 22-23. All the budget wasn't quite complete. Some councils were still waiting confirmation of their annual plans to put budgets in, and we were trying to bring back the budget, and that's included in this report. So that we have now 4 councils that have included their budgets allocated to CDM. I would just caution is that at the moment we're still in that space across councils of how the CDM budgets are calculated. So they might look a bit out, but that's because we quite haven't got around what is considered CDM and what's not CDM. It's truly. So I think it's a great step forward in that we've been more transparent, but we still got a journey to go on this. So I submit the budgets are there as per your respective annual plans for acceptance to the annual.
Questions? None. I'm therefore happy to move myself both the receipt and the approval of the group plan annual budget allocation. Seconded. Thank you, Mayor Rister. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Page, sorry, item 8.3, page 22. Again for the annual report.
Just got it.
Thank you, Chair. The annual report.
Folks, for just a minute. Good morning, Deputy Mayor David Donaldson. That is you, I presume, under the hat.
It is. I've had to jump onto my iPad because my iMac's not going to comply. But greetings.
Oh, it's important that we always do get representatives from each council, so I'm delighted to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As each year we have an annual plan, we also do an annual report. This is the annual report for the last financial year. The report is in draft here. It has gone through the Cape Local Authority Subcommittee, the General Manager level. It's gone through the Coordinating Executive Group as well, and has been endorsed at each level and is submitted here for approval. The report pretty much is structured in that it highlights all the achievements across the different councils and emergency management Bay of Plenty for the past year. It also summarises some of the key activities and the everything that's been achieved in the past year and the challenges. So this report is a combined report, and the contributions are from all individual councils as well as their achievements. So the report is presented here today for adoption by this committee.
I took some time reading that report, and I have to say, I think it's a great piece of work, so thank you for that. Are there any questions or observations? No? Right, we'll be finished before we start. Right, so can somebody move receipt and approval? Mayor Campbell.
Happy to second.
Mayor Rister, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item 8.4, page 45. Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Plan Development 2023-2028. Right, Clinton, over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair. Just to remind members, we are in the process of reviewing a group plan. It's a legal requirement under the CDM Emergency Management Act. Our plan is being on review on a project. It has faced some challenges this year. The main one being that there's national change. So there's a new law being drafted to replace the CDEMG. There's a new national plan. Equally, it didn't help that we have a local government election in the middle of it as well. So quite a few challenges to the staff in this project. But the update we're presenting today is while we're making good progress, we have submitted to the steering group and the local authority subcommittee and the Court Executive Group to extend the timeline. We were aiming to have a draft out this side of local government elections. We just feel that that is a bit ambitious and that we'd be a better position to give ourselves some more time to allow for the bill, which is expected, and I won't steal Jackie's presentation later, but is expected to be released in November. So we want to get a clearer steer.
Yes, I'm trying to get my head around the fact that when we hear about the new bill, we're told that it's not changing that much. It is really adding in some things that were omitted or I would considered in the past. So it's not a. Have I got that wrong?
I think it's probably best that we wait for Jackie's presentation, and I'm sure you'll be covering that.
Thank you, Chair. I do have an item about that, but I'm happy to talk to it now.
No, we'll wait. And are you happy to?
Yeah, sure. That is fine.
Through that, but it is important that it's covered.
I think if I can just explain, while the national, the minister has indicated this is not transformational, I think the words used, but they are trying to address issues in the previous legislation that didn't work.
Yes.
The key thing is the group plan is the one that then takes the national policy and direction and turns it into so what in the Bay. So that's why we're pausing. So while we don't expect, we sort of know the change coming, the question would be for this group is how. So the national says do something, we need to have a discussion, how is that going to be done in the Bay? Because each group's different. So that's why we're not too worried about where we're going nationally. We're more concerned around, okay, once we get that direction, what do we do?
Mayor Webber.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to move recommendations 1 and 2 based on what Clinton has just advised us, that we have to give effect to the national direction. So it's pragmatic to wait for that to come through. And I think it's also pragmatic to wait till the new mayors and chairs are in place to sign it off, because they're the ones that will be doing the work. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think we were getting nods all around the table about that. So I think it was the right and sensible thing to do and the pragmatic thing to do, as you say. So, yeah. And so can somebody seconded by Mayor Turner. So are there any questions before I put it to the table? No, thank you. Right, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Right, item 8.5 on page 50. Right, was there somebody want to speak? No, right, item 8.5, page 50, CDEMG Group Tsunami Ready Programme Update. This is where we slow the meeting down a bit and I ask for Clinton, can you lead this item for Melinda?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have this as a standing item on all our committees for CDM, and this again, just a reminder, comes from the 5th of March pre-earthquake scenario where we had the evacuation of the East Coast here and various parts of New Zealand. We prioritised a tsunami readiness program, which Melinda Meads is leading from our office, working across all councils, and we're bringing an update at each committee. So today we're presenting you the work to date, and I'll be handing over to Mel to take you through some of those highlights.
And of course, you're very welcome, Linda. Nice to see you again, and over to you.
Kia ora, thank you. Thank you, Clinton. Thank you, Chair, through the Chair. So this is an update just to highlight some key points from the paper that is in the agenda. So just in brief, there is no change to the aim of the program for Tsunami Ready for the Bay and Plenty CDM Group. So you'll see there that aim, the aim is unchanged and is to develop a coordinated approach to ensure consistency and alignment and to make sure that we consider and give effect to current science. You'll see there on the screen, it's also in your paper, a series of priorities for the program at present. Those priorities are focused on program risk, updating tsunami evacuation zone maps for the region, looking at the commissioning of further modelling work because of some of the risks that we have highlighted in the Bay, public education and community engagement, and particularly supporting local programs of work through councils, and tsunami response planning. There are a number of risks to the program, and in this forum, when we last met, there was a request made for the complete program risk register to be provided to this forum. You'll see that that is attached to the agenda item for this paper. So I have briefed all the risks, but there are a number of new ones which appear on the slide, including I have briefed around the tsunami evacuation national map previously, but also some risks I've identified with the move to a one zone approach for the Bay of Plenty, which I'll highlight further in a moment, and also about the timely completion of the mapping project to ensure that we can provide communities with the correct information with reference to their tsunami evacuation zones. In the risk register, you'll see that I've not only highlighted risk, but the mitigation strategies for each of those risks to ensure that we can reduce the overall effect of those risks. The tsunami evacuation zone mapping project, I've highlighted this previously, but this is the #1 priority piece of work in the program at present. This work is being led through Emergency Management Bay of Plenty and also with extensive GIS support through Regional Council. A number of ground truthing workshops have already occurred with each of the local authorities, and we are conducting a second series of those workshops to confirm mapping very soon in the coming weeks. We're also clarifying the modelling outputs from each of the reports that we have at present from GNS Science, East Coast, the provider East Coast, and also Tonkin and Taylor for Taronga City. The timeframes for completion of the MAP project are intended to still be by the end of October, and ideally we would like to roll out a new launch of MAPs with alignment to exercise shakeout, which is on the 27th of October. So within that weekend, that last week in October is when we'd ideally like to roll out and launch these new maps. The modelling work is underway to scope the project to commission work for future modelling for that comprehensive approach right across the Bay of Plenty. Timeframes and indicative costs are being scoped at present. On launch of the new maps, of course, we need to sync to the National Tsunami Evacuation Map, and work is in play with NEMA to ensure that we can make sure that there is a sync of what we're doing locally to regionally to that map nationally all at the same time. So you'll see from that previous slide, at the moment we have tsunami evacuation zones based on those three colours of red, orange and yellow. We are currently still updating our maps with that consideration, in particular for CDM planning. But we have moved towards...
You just hold just for a minute, they've just passed out some maps.
Yes.
And I'd like people to actually give the maps to just have a chance to glance through them and continue.
Yeah.
I want to be able to give you our undivided attention.
No problem, Chair.
Thank you.
About the ones on Zoom.
For those on Zoom, we will send, there will be a copy attached to the minutes, but I can't do anything else other than that. Or we can send them out in advance to those people.
Through the chair, I understand that they've only made them available for face-to-face, but the slide is meant to represent the maps that I've got there in hard copy, and I can make sure that they're available for the minutes.
Thank you.
Through the chair, just to note while this forum is looking at these maps, I just want to highlight that the approach for the maps you are looking at now is for public facing maps only. And once you've had a moment to peruse those, I can explain that further.
Now, Webber, do you want to ask a question now? You're on mute. Gary, you're on mute.
No, thank you. I'll let the speaker continue, and I'll come in when she's finished. Thanks.
Thank you. Right.
They're obviously not finished.
No. Right.
There's a few missing.
Through the chair.
We're back to Belinda. Thank you.
Through the chair. So the maps that you'll see highlighted on the slide, and also that I've presented to you, are a snapshot of what we intend to produce. So to answer your question through the chair, so yes, 100%, they are not all the maps for the Bay of Plenty, but to give you a snapshot in particular to ensure that I could show you one map for each coastal council. So as I said, the previous maps we've had for the Bay of Plenty have been focused on 3 zones. There are a number of CDM groups, so a number of other regions that also have moved to a 1-zone approach for public-facing maps for their regions. The example of those 2 regions are the Waikato, obviously one of our close neighbours, and Wellington. The move to a 1-zone approach for public-facing maps keeps the messaging simple, reduces public confusion around what does the zones mean, and also it also provides a very clear message of where you need to evacuate to without worrying about what colour zone that you are in. Through the Coordinating Executive Group Local Authority Subcommittee meeting, the decision was made and agreed for a 1-zone approach just for the public-facing maps. So there was agreement that there still need to be work done and completed on the 3 zones, but for our internal council and CDM planning, but for public-facing maps to move to this 1-zone approach. So what I presented to you in hard copy, and also is what is present on the slide, is the work that we're doing and how the maps will look when we launch them. There are still some tweaks to make to these maps, in particular just around the fact that there is a lot of blue. So just to make sure that there is clarity around blue arrows and blue areas, but the narrative on the right-hand side and the concept as a whole is what we are working towards with that launch. Also, you'll note on those maps, on the bottom right-hand corner, there is space for a barcode. So through the chair, also to answer a question around online maps, it is the intent that that barcode will link to our GIS online platform, where there'll be where those maps can be viewed from, and also that will ensure that we can have that longevity in our maps. So if there are future updates, that barcode will always link back to the current maps. I'll just pause there if there's any questions through the chair.
I have just one minor observation. I find the colours a little bit confusing. It would be much more helpful if you had what is a sort of turquoisey blue colour, which is quite near the sea. It takes a minute to focus on what it actually is. I think it would be better if that was changed to some other colour to highlight what it actually is.
Through the chair, we have done a fair bit of work and also looked at what the Waikato and Wellington are doing with their 1-zone approach for public maps. The colours that are on this map, for consistency, right down to the hex code they're called, for the colour of the map. So what we're trying to achieve is alignment to make sure that a Wellington 1-zone approach, a Waikato 1-zone approach will hopefully also align to what we do.
Okay, I'm quite happy. I'd be interested to hear what the other members of the group think about that. And I might suggest that if people agree with my position, then we might well write a letter and suggest better clarity might be achieved nationally if we are moved to a different colour scheme. Mayor Rister, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. I was thinking back to our last meeting when we spent quite a lot of time discussing the inaccuracies around the national information on their mapping and in accordance with what we know is correct in the Bay of Plenty. And I was wondering where we were at concerning that information.
Through the chair, so that is the work that is being completed with extensive GIS support. So it is the intent that those inaccuracies are being fixed to ensure that we have alignment in our data to what's happening nationally. So on launch of our new maps, so not only PDF community maps, which are a version of what you see in front of you, there will be alignment to the GIS platform, which then will align to the national GIS platform. So there will be continued alignment, and it's my intent to do testing, in particular of that national platform before it goes live, to ensure we don't have those same inconsistencies that were appearing in what we discussed in our last meeting.
Yes, I agree about the colouring, and I also think what will happen if those are out in the sun. You know, what the importance of public maps in certain places are really, I mean, we're already getting lots of comment from the community about there being no, you know, up-to-date maps up, etc., and all of that type of information. I think our communities are actually very aware and want to know as soon as possible the most up-to-date information. I'd be interested to know if these have been passed by graphic designers around the quality of the colours for the best look, but also the durability on the types of signs that you will want out in the public arena.
Thanks for that, Mayor. Your comments are very much noted. Mayor Webber.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it's good to see a report writer who can get the message through in less than 10 pages, and I appreciate that. Clinton, and my questions to Clinton. Earlier on in the training, we got a really good presentation from a scientist about the tsunami tracking information that's all set up through the Pacific. And I wonder if it's a possibility of having a total one map from the sort of top of the Coromandel to the end of East Cape. And a one pager on the likelihood of where the tsunami will come from and what is the likely effect area. If it comes from the north, then we'll have one effect. If it comes from the west, we'll have a different effect. That was really well presented, and whether we could get a one pager from that person that goes with a one map from the top of the Coromandel to the East Cape as possible to add to this, because that's a really good report, and I understand the subset of maps, but if there's an overarching one that goes with them with a bit of an explanation of where the tsunamis are likely to come from, I think that would add a bit of value to the report. Thank you.
Clinton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mayor Webber, you're quite right. That's fundamental to what we are reviewing through this whole program. The committee at a previous meeting had approved us to go and scope doing modelling across the whole bay. It does become challenging, Coromandels under Waikato and part of the East Cape's Tairāwhiti. But that said, we are working closely with our neighbours. In fact, now as Space Acting Manager Planning, we're with Tairāwhiti and Gisborne this week on the Ikarangi program. So the big threat down there is the Ikarangi Trench. Right. We're also worried on our side about the Kermadec Trench. And then, of course, we've got distant sources and etc. So we are putting that all together. And that's what that new modelling we're commissioning is about, is to paint that one picture for us, which is also why I support a one zone approach, because those colours, different sources could give different wave heights, could get different. There's too much complexity for the public. When the message goes out, we want to be able to move out of the one zone, move to a safe zone, to use that sort of concept, rather than them trying to worry out where's it coming from, how big is it. We all worry about that. But the short answer is yes, Mayor Webber, we are definitely taking that on board, and that's the picture we're trying to paint now, is that simple, consistent picture across the coastline.
Great, thank you. Once again, you do a great job.
I'm a bit indifferent. I differ in my opinion on the colour. I actually think that me and Campbell just made the suggestion that perhaps the coastline could be slightly darker lined.
A bit like that.
But for me, it actually is really clear where water is and where water is going to be going. I think that keeping the colour that way is a clearer. You suddenly go into a pink or a different colour and people can start saying, well, hold on, what does that mean? That is very clear to me where the risk area is.
Worst case scenario.
Yep, worst case scenario. So I actually quite like it being a blue thing. The other thing I'll just say is that, and I've brought this up before, and it is in one sense a separate issue, but when we had the evacuation here in Whakatane, the screamingly obvious problem once we got everybody there was we had no facilities for them at all. And because it didn't last for more than a couple of hours, that was okay and we got through it. But if it had lasted longer, it was already brewing as a problem. It was helped a little bit by people being generous with the use of their homes and toilets and things like that. But even that was going to run out of currency pretty darn quickly. We had something like 3 or 4 schools whose lunches had all been delivered to the school, but hadn't been brought up the hill as well. I mean, it was just issue after issue after issue. So while I think this is great, I've got a kind of compliment. I actually do like the colour. I think it's really abundantly clear where the risks are in a way that I don't think previous maps have been. But I think the next challenge for all of us, and including councils, is we need to start thinking about the receiving parts, because that is the second round of crisis that we need to start giving thought to as well.
Through the chair, I have a comment in response. Hopefully I can answer some of your concerns. So first of all, thank you for your comments on the map. I have noted those. The other piece that is being conducted through GNS Science is some social science work on the human behaviour around maps. GNS Science looking at both 3 zones in some areas and 1 zones. That work is ongoing. It is connected but unrelated to our map launch. But what I have requested, and I'm yet to finalise, is potentially some case study work that GNS Science are conducting on the human behaviour about 1 zones and 3 zones. So I've requested that we include it in their case study work, but indications are that a 1 zone approach makes things very simple for communities and easy to understand. But I've noted what's been said in this forum around the maps and tweaking.
So just to clarify too, I understand that in terms of the receiving part of the environment, there may be some differences, but I totally agree with this across the zone. I think that's really helpful. It's also helpful because families are spread across the whole thing and getting a sense of where they're. I'm looking at going, oh, my kid's house is in trouble. So it's actually those kind of conversations that you start to motivate across the whole road.
I think, from my point of view, I welcome the clarity of the one zone in that it does take out the complexity. I think it fills for public consumption. You've heard our comments about the colour. It's not generally agreed, but you might like to mention it in passing, and Jackie, you might like to mention it in passing back to the ranch, just to see if there is any other comment. Excuse me, any comments about it. Right, Melinda.
Through the chair, and also just recognising Mayor Turner's other comments, the piece around what happened on the 5th of March and the lessons learned are very much front and centre with actually the 2 next slides that I have. So I can talk to that in particular with reference to schools and response planning, but also in general, through the chair, Clinton mentioned around Stace and my attendance at the Te workshop that's just been conducted. While there was a focus on Hikurangi response planning from a tsunami event, there are lessons and very much that conversation can be transferred to what we're doing in the Bay of Plenty. So that was why it was really beneficial that we were there, given that obviously, you know, in a tsunami event, borders or regional borders are not really a thing. So that work was really beneficial. And in reference to those other two pieces, I think my next slides might cover that for you. Thank you.
Okay, Melinda, right, we've interrupted your presentation, so back to you, and apologies for interruptions.
Through the chair, I'll just continue with my slides, just a few more to go. First of all, public education. I mentioned that there was a focus on support for public education and the community engagement programs with a emergency management focus for local councils. So in particular, just to highlight a few streams of work in this space. First of all, we have done a stock take of all the tsunami-related resources internationally, nationally, and what occurs in the Bay of Plenty and other regions at the moment. So what is ongoing is that we are making sure that some of those international and national resources can be tweaked to suit Bay of Plenty communities. So that piece of work is ongoing. Also, based on some of the lessons learned from the 5th of March, we are doing some pilot work with schools right across the Bay of Plenty. But what we've produced is a suite of resources to support schools and their tsunami evacuation planning. So schools have access to quite a wide range of guidelines that are quite lengthy and quite comprehensive documents, but what schools need is some simple checklists and templates that can complement their requirements through the Ministry of Education, so that they can get to the crux of what they need to do to conduct an evacuation of schools. And that's also to consider whether they do need to evacuate. So lessons that we saw on the 5th of March, in particular around the Whakatane area, were that there were schools that weren't in tsunami zones that evacuated, so they didn't actually need to. So that's the first step in these questions, is identifying, do you need to evacuate? So these resources have been put in place to also help mitigate some of what happened on the 5th of March, where there was an influx of families going to pick up children, driving into tsunami evacuation zones, causing traffic jams. So we can't mitigate all of that risk and we can't mitigate that human behaviour, but what we can try and do is support schools in their planning, and then they can provide communications to their wider school communities that they have a school plan, trust in the school plan, know that your children will be safe. So apart from those maps, those checklist documents, there is a series of pamphlets and collateral to support that message. So that is being piloted mainly in Taronga, because they were the ones that asked for this piece of work, but those resources are also available in Opotiki, Whakatane, and also Western Bay. Finally, tsunami hikoi, so tsunami evacuation drills. This is also happening in the next month in line with Exercise Shakeout on the 27th of October. There are various activities occurring with each coastal council. In Opotiki, it is a suite of activities all focused around the Opotiki Library, promoting make sure you plan your tsunami evacuation. So that's a week-long program that's being planned at present. Whakatane is planning on doing a district council hikoi, and then some activities at the Memorial Hall, given that that is in a safe area. Western Bay and Taronga are both doing activities focused around school hikois, but the intent is that they will be annual events with a focus on what is suited to engagement programs at that period of time. We're also looking at some activities at Regional Council, both for Whakatane and Taronga, to support Exercise Shakeout. So we're also developing resources, once again, that will support what is suitable for the Bay of Plenty. Just finally, tsunami response planning. Work has commenced on tsunami response planning and a draft framework that will include what's happening with planning frameworks nationally, what's happening regionally, what's happening with our neighbours, including Tarapati and the Waikato and other regions as well. And that framework will set the scene and prioritise work in a series of work streams. So looking at what we need to do for evacuation, what the roles and responsibilities of other agencies are, what we need to do for communications, what we need to do for, if we need to, about welfare, what we need to do for dealing with the deceased, a whole lot of work streams that will feed into that. We're intending on having a more of an all hazards approach with then supporting plans that will support hazards. So there is a lot of work being done at present with the Mount Industrial Zone and other hazards. So some of the work streams will be the same, or the outputs will be the same. So we just make sure we're connecting what we're doing in the tsunami space with other pieces of work in the planning space across the region. Just finally, in my paper, I highlighted a series of recommendations, obviously to receive the report, approve the current priority of work, and the risk register is there as an attachment, and it was just to accept the current risks that I've highlighted as part of the program.
Thank you for that, Melinda. I'm very pleased to hear of the progress you're making. I expected nothing less. It is a huge piece of work which you're involved in, and it's obviously going well. And I think it gives us reassurance that the correct planning is taking place for the future. Mayor Campbell.
Yes, Chair. Great report. Just one thing though, item 2, approve the current priority. The word priority. Regional Council covers a big area, and I'd like to certainly see what the Wakatani and Apoki ones are, like these inundation maps. And I have to say that the issue of, once it has happened, and I know that a lot of people arrived in my batch on that time, because it is human nature. If you've got any brains, get the hell out of it and get as high as possible as you can. And looking at some of the areas, particularly in Ahopi, it's quite terrifying looking at where you've got conversion traffic trying to get out of the place and all trying to get up on the highest ground you can possibly do. I can absolutely applaud you, because I know that in the Papamau area, for instance, there's a hell of a streak across that swamp and up into the hills if I was running, because that'd be the quickest way to get out of there. And I know that friends of mine that were involved in that last one said it was absolute chaos. So yeah, I think it's more about education, and the one big thing we all know about is if it's long and strong, get gone. And that's one thing that resounds all the way through the whole thing. But yeah, great bit of work. And as I say, I think the only thing that we need to know is that inundation line, the coastal line, between the two colours would make it a lot easier for anyone to look at. But please don't do it as 1, 2, or 3. We're in the Eastern Bay. We're just as important here. We might not have as many people around, but by crikey, it could be quite devastating for us. And well, I know it will be. Yeah, so let's just make sure that Eastern Bay is part of it, because I might be around the table here and representing the Eastern Bay. I certainly have as one of the 3 mayors. And yeah, great work, Dave. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks for that, Mayor Campbell. I think what's good for highlighting is the fact that the reason we're doing this report is because of the lessons learned from the past. We know that we are inadequate at the moment, which is why we've commissioned a report. So I'm glad to see the progress. Mayor Rister.
Yes, it's interesting. It's not the blue over the land that's the problem for me when I look at the map. It's actually the arrows and the tsunami safe location signs that my eyes have problem with.
The arrows.
Streets being white, that's really helpful.
Yes, yes. And may I ask a couple of questions through you, Chair?
Please do.
So the safe locations, would that be where we might then be thinking for tsunami there needs to be some conveniences or something along those lines? That was my first question. And the other one is actually a comment, because the thing with people is that, yes, we did the evacuation, and then people begin to feel inconvenienced because nothing's happened. And I think the education point from our community has to be, we're very lucky that this civil emergency hasn't actually happened, but we've got it right. We're doing what we need to do to protect everybody. Not having your packed lunch or a toilet for a little amount of time for whatever might happen. If the disaster actually happens, people won't be thinking about that. So I think it's also important for us to have those conversations about how we are as people. And that's what I liked. I was hoping that that was part of the study around the social aspects of you know, coping with a disaster. The interesting thing with this is that almost completely different, we will behave differently depending on what type of natural disaster we have. And I think it's great, because once we get this information going and we start feeding it out into our community, I'm hoping that this type of information will be available at events and so on, you know. And the other thing is that natural disasters don't seem to occur at convenient times either in our day.
Just through here, can I just say one thing? I just want to follow up on what Lynn's saying, that in the Edgecombe event in Kawerau, one lady turned up, Bill Clark's wife. Now Alison's a very practical person. She went straight down to the supermarket and bought every piece of toiletry, particularly for women, that was available, and donated it. And a lot of that sort of thing happens, and you know, people are displaced, and it's the last thing they think of until it's needed, even a toothbrush, you know. So those are the sort of things you really need to know. And I believe that nationally we should be talking about a tote bag or a grab bag, you know, run. And the other thing is for families to have a plan of their own, because when they're displaced and got to get back together, they can have a place that they're going to at least contact each other, because that really creates a whole lot of problems. And I know that I had a niece here in Kawerau, in Whakatane, and she didn't even know where to go. She couldn't get out of Landing Road, and she rang us in Kawerau, and I said, go to Taniatua. She'd never been to Taniatua, for God's sake. And those are the sort of things that people need to know what's around the corner, for goodness sake. You know, you've got to get away from the ocean. That's number one.
I think you've highlighted a problem. I think the problem, part of the problem we have is, yes, we can try education, and we can try and get everybody to have their go bag and their, but there'll be a vast number of the population who won't, and the plan has to cater for those as well, and they're the difficult ones. So, Melinda, do you want to respond to anything?
So through the chair, and just to address what was said around those, noted again with reference to, you know, some of the readability around the information you have in front of you. The tsunami evacuation zone, the tsunami safe location signs. So you'll see in the maps that we've made a comment that anywhere beyond the evacuation zone is safe. But with those in particular for visitors, or if you're unfamiliar with the area, having some points on a map we thought would be useful. But also, yes, the intent is that we then know that there will potentially be people that will go to those points. So that was 100% a focus on where we need to look at places for welfare. It is understood that a lot of those places on the map do not have any facilities at the moment. But primary aim, thinking of that life safety and ensuring people are safe, is to get people to a safe point first. And then part of our response planning is then those next steps around welfare and how we look after people once they have evacuated to that point, and depending on how long they're going to be there for. So I hope that answers that.
No, that's good. I think the two things that became very apparent from the March the 5th was there were 2 or 3 little places down our coastline where people ended up evacuating up to the state highway with nothing, not even a place to be. Marae Nui springs to mind immediately. But the other really good thing about the evacuation was that I think most people then worked out where they needed to go the next time, so that everybody had a place to head to. So the crowds were spread out and had facilities, if that makes sense, so that, you know, the relations were going to where they needed to go. And the people that we needed to check on that I found were the visitors and the people moving through at the time, ensuring they had water and access to toilets and so on. But you're right, as soon as they were up on the hill, we could at least take care of them. The locals could take care of those people.
Through the chair, if we so if we're aware about where there will be a concentration of people, potentially around those tsunami safe location areas, that's where we can target the next steps to look after those people that are evacuated. With reference to the general comments around the messages, right across the board, preparedness and what people need to do, aligning to all this work is the communications that go with this. So, and the messages not only on lots of maps, but involved with Hikoi, and there is those continued messages that we will always push around personal preparedness, what you need to take with you if you have time, and what to do once you have evacuated if you needed to do that. So there is extensive communications and planning that is ongoing and will accompany all these pieces of work on launch.
Yeah, well,
yes, thank you. To avoid giddiness, I'm quite happy to move recommendations 1, 2 and 3 on page 51.
Thank you, Mayor Webber. We've got some other questions coming up first. Deputy Mayor Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 points of concern with, again, referring back to the March event. We had evacuations through to Kara, as Mayor Campbell's already alluded to. We also had quite extensive evacuation through into Taniatua. At what point or at what stage are iwi and hapu connected with regards to the willingness to hopefully possibly house or have people at the marae, where of course we have the conveniences, kitchens, etc., basically ready to be stood up at the shortest of times when it comes to funeral arrangements, etc. So are they included? And my second question is, people also in a state of an emergency like that have concerns over the domestic pets. Is that mentioned at all? And I couldn't find any reference to that.
Clinton.
Yeah, through the chair. Very valid points. Firstly, on the question of the role of iwi and Maori and marae in particular, that is definitely a strong substream of our work for preparedness. Stacey at the back there is working across our iwi and with the local councils. A lot of that will be informed by these zones, so which marae will serve as those natural evacuation centres. And we're working with Te Puni Kōkiri as well as in how can we then support them to be equipped and resourced to serve as those centres. Yes. So that is a strong piece. And the messaging around animals definitely will be in there. It's in all our, when we talk welfare to communities, we include animals. And so that will be included as well as the messaging and the public education pieces that go out.
Thank you.
Can you just remind me, please, of the intensity of a wave that will inundate that farm? Can you just, what are we talking about? Are we talking a Fukushima event or?
Melinda, can you answer that one, or is it Jackie?
Through the chair, so there are 3 different sources of modelling reports that inform what you see in front of you. I will have to go back and confirm the actual wave height at coast because we have 3 different modelling outputs depending on what part of the coastline and the overlay of each of those modelling reports that we needed to consider. Also, the wave height will be dependent on the source where that wave is coming from. Clinton highlighted that a wave that's coming from the Kermadec will be slightly different to Hikurangi, and of course we can't rule out what might happen if there was something large enough with Whakaari. So it is dependent, wave height is dependent on source, and also each of those modelling reports, highlight, have done their modelling slightly differently. So it's not an easy question to answer, but I can go back and provide some more detail if required.
Worst case scenario would be what I would be more comfortable with, because it's better to be safe than sorry. But yeah, I just think about those sea walls that we saw in Japan were just inundated and overflowed, and large boats would just go and washing over as if they weren't even there. So that's the sort of thing, and then it just tracks in land. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Tim. I think what we have to see is that the one zone must be a worst case scenario. And I think it's a good idea to have that worst case scenario. But again, the education will need to be to point some of these facts out. Melinda, do you want to comment at this point?
Through the chair, so the one zone covers all 3 of our previous zones. So, and the yellow zone, which is that previous furthest extent, is our maximum credible event. So that is the furthest extent based on the science we know right now of where a wave will go to. That doesn't mean to say that a wave at coast, that might be 5 metres, will be 5 metres all that way inland. We have to think that it will be, a smaller wave the further inland that it goes. But what you're seeing on those maps there is the maximum credible event, and that is based particularly on a regional Kermadec scenario.
Thank you for that.
Deputy Burrows.
Just again, talking back to that point, is any scoping being done on the impact, depending again on the size of the tsunami, as to how it would impact rivers? For example, if it was how far up a river network is it likely, bearing in mind I've just said, well, it would be ideal for Taneatua, et cetera, whereas a network of rivers, how far? Has that been scoped at all? So what the impact?
Through the chair, so the modelling reports that we have in particular from East Coast, that provider provides us how far up the rivers that a tsunami wave will go. So that is being factored in to the update of maps that we're currently completing.
Thank you for that. I'm not quite sure if it's Jackie or you, but I can answer. Obviously, this is work in progress at the moment. But I think we need to ask that the map comes out as quick, the public map comes out as quickly as possible once we are certain about it. So can I ask for a production date for the map, or?
Through the chair, sorry, I'm not quite sure of your question. The national map.
When are these maps going to be released to the public?
Through the chair. So it is the intent. We're working towards a launch of maps by the end of October to align with exercise shakeout. So there are a lot of moving parts with that piece of work to ensure that we launch all of the maps across all councils. The public education piece, and also ensuring that we have linked all the data to the national tsunami evacuation map. So there is a lot of work in the coming month.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Clinton, would you want to make a comment then?
No, I was just, thank you, Chair, just supporting that the target is October.
Right, I think we've discussed that probably sufficiently. Unless there's any other comments, can I have, it has been moved, can I have a second? Further? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Right, 8.6, page 58, declaring states of a local emergency during local government elections.
Thank you, Chair. As you alluded to at the opening, just a reminder to members that obviously as we go into the local government election period, there are aspects that impact this committee and yourselves as mayors, deputy mayors, etc. of local authorities. The report is there, the fact sheet there that was attached, there is a revised version to be sent out from the national agency that replaces that. It's tabled and I'm sure it's been sent out. What I just would paint the picture, just to remind members, is a couple of things. States of emergency and also declaring transition notices for recovery. They legal documents can only be done by elected officials. So the first myth I'd like to bust is that myth that councils can delegate that to their CEO. The CEO cannot exercise that authority under the CDEMG Act. They can do stuff under the Local Government Act, that's fine, but don't confuse with this. And because it can only be done by elected officials, when we go into local government elections, yourselves all remain as part of the Civil Defence Committee in place until the announcement of the results. The moment the electoral officer announces the results, then even if you're a returning elected official, you no longer have the authority until you take the oath of office. And councils take weeks to do that. So that's the little window that we have a grip with. However, there are mitigations for that. And the main mitigation, generally speaking, is that states of emergency are then, transition notice are then issued by the minister. The minister has authority to declare anyway. So if you end up in an issue in a local authority during that window, roughly 2 weeks before mayors and deputy mayors are sworn back in, then the local controllers are directed to contact myself as group controller. We facilitate through remits to get the minister to sign. So that's the simplest version. There is a clause in a slow-moving event where a council could call an emergency meeting or ceremony and swear in the mayor. I would advise that that is sort of convoluted. Easiest is just let us get it done with the minister. We do, however, have one additional benefit here in the Bay of Plenty, and that's with Commissioner Anne Tolley and Commissioner Bill Wasley being appointed for Tauranga City Council. Commissioners hold the same authority, but not, in this case, are not impacted by the transition period. So I have briefed Commissioner Wasley on this. The commissioners are able to still declare for Tauranga City as local, and by being members of this group can declare for any district or city and for the region, because they are under the group plan authorised to do that. That said, there's no obligation on the commissioners to be available for that. It will be dependent. So again, I recommend that during that period, and we brief the local controllers, they will contact our office and we will look at the most exponential system that the commissioner is available versus the minister.
Just talking about the, say, fast track swearing in process, did you say that's quite difficult, or is that?
No, I'm just saying that that's an option if the council chooses to do that, but you then have to go through that process.
I'm just thinking about, you know, there's a front facing for the community that's almost immediate, that messaging, and they like somebody they recognise, hopefully. And I do think I could see places that actually doing that would be quite a smart thing to do as quickly as possible. So that, yeah.
I think that's true. I think there's two different things here. There's the mayor providing leadership in the community and the statutory responsibility of declaring an emergency. And I think whenever you're elected, whether or not you're confirmed, if you've been elected, then you're expected to be the leader of that community. Right. Do you want to come in now, Jackie? I've got some questions from Zoom, but
just through the chair, just to follow on from that point, we don't recommend the rushing the swearing in process because there's a risk that something might not be quite done technically right, and then things could be left open. So that's why our recommendation is to go through the minister or to use your solution.
I understand that until the final vote's been confirmed, I agree that that's quite
Commissioner Wasley. Bill, you're on mute.
I think it was Mayor Gary before me, Chair.
Well, you've been very quiet, so now I've got you.
Okay. Well, I was just going to move the recommendations, Chair.
It has been moved. I take it you've seconded it.
I'll second it then.
Okay, that's fine. So, Mayor Webber.
Yeah, I was going to move it some time ago, but it's been done. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've lost the plot. I thought you had moved it. So you had moved it, in fact. So yeah, so it's moved by Mayor Watley, seconded by Commissioner. It's moved by Mayor Webber, seconded by Commissioner Watley. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Thank you. Great. Right. Good. Right. Now we can move now to public excluded. Jackie. Jackie, I'm sorry. Where are we? We're 8.7, page 65. Jackie.
I'll just click that again. Just give me a minute. Oh, cool. Thank you. Fantastic. So thank you, Chairman. So firstly, it's really lovely to see you all in person after being a talking head on the screen for so many months. And before I sort of go forward with this report, just to clarify, so the intention is that Lily will be taking over as your REMA. We're currently going through a reallocation process across the REMA team in the country, but I have just had confirmation that we are still going forward with that plan. So I'd just like to give Lily the opportunity to introduce herself as well before I go on.
Through the chair, Nera Tumia to Kia Koutou, ko Lily Fold, aho.
Lily, can you speak up, because we've got to carry through the ether.
Apologies. Again, through the chair, Nera Tumia to Kia Koutou, ko Lily Fold, aho, no Opunoni me roa toki. Aho, I'm Regional Emergency Management Advisor, newly in the team for about 4 months now. I've come from the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Group and Epi City Council, and it's lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
Lily.
Thank you, Lily.
You're very welcome, and we look forward to seeing you at future meetings. Whether you see all the people around here depends a lot, of course, on the electorate, but we'll see. Right.
Fantastic. So thank you, Lily. So the trifecta program, as we've been discussing before, it looks like we will be calling for submissions in November with a view to hearing submissions early next year when the House recommences. In terms of the comments around the program not being transformational, what that sort of reflects is at the moment there are a number of reform programs underway across local government, as you're all very well aware, that are a lot more significant. Whereas the trifecta, the changes to the Act were always intended to sort of be minor legislative tidy-ups. So what we were looking at was amendments to the Act, but then given the Act is around 20 years old and it's had a number of amendments over time, it was decided that it would be the cleanest option to go forward with a new bill. So that bill process is underway and tracking well. And we're also looking at the review of the emergency management plan at the moment, which is the accompanying document. The other thing that is very much on our radar at the national level is the increased risks around foot and mouth disease. So that has been detected overseas in Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries. So planning is underway at the national level to look at what the arrangements are for a response to an incursion if that was to happen. This has been a very, very busy winter. So there's been a number of severe weather events across the country, and it's really highlighted the pressure on the system after being in COVID for a long time alongside a lot of other responses. And Nelson particularly, but also on the West Coast, surge staff was required to support those responses. And Nelson Tasman in particular is incredibly grateful for the help that was provided. As I understand it, some staff from the Bay of Plenty supported that response.
and they were absolutely fantastic. Particularly Lisa Glass, the PIM, her posts are up on social media, and the community was commenting on how fantastic her communication was. So a big thank you to all for providing that support. And we've also signed an agreement with FEMA to support cooperation with them. This is the first of a series of agreements our international team are putting in place. And what that's doing is affirming our international relationships and supporting that collaboration overseas. So that's really it from us today. But if there's any questions, happy to take those.
Any questions or comments, please?
I'll just do the squeaky wheel. If only the different government agencies would actually talk to each other as to when they're all changing everything, because again, we have something of real importance to our council and councils happening over a time when we more or less go into recess. So the bill is done in November. Again, the limited time for us, when our staff's supposed to have their holidays or ourselves, but no, I mean, I'm being a bit facetious about that, but the point is, this sort of stacks up to a very large number of important submissions that our councils need to be doing exactly at the same time and at the wrong time for local government. Yet again, and we have been saying this all year, but there is no respite. And it doesn't help having it acknowledged if it's not changed. And it's not reflected at you. It's actually at the central government and the timing, which they have not got right in their reforms.
Chair. I'd just like to concur with Mayor Ristra on that. It actually hasn't been a year. It's been 21 years for me that this has just been a reoccurring thing. And bureaucrats in Wellington really need a bloody shake up as to what you want to get some action from us. Work with us. Don't work against us. Don't pile a whole lot of rubbish down the line. And absolutely, I'm not shooting the messenger here. But by crikey, there's some people in Wellington really need a good shake-up. Probably retired would be a good thing, because they've been around there for 21 years that I've been around there. So I don't know if I'm doing the right thing by saying that, but it is quite tiring. It's quite onerous, and this is so important because by crikey, and I mean, I woke up this morning and I didn't even know there was a large earthquake in the Nelson area last night. But it's just. It can happen. Emergency don't wait for anyone. It's nature.
It was quite interesting, and I didn't.
Sorry, if we just sit here and take this all the time, it's just going to keep going on. It's going to bang the table.
I think that's why it's important. We do invite the minister to come down and hear the comments from around the table. I think that's the way we need to attack it rather than in any other way. And it was also interesting to hear on the radio on the way down that White Island had erupted over the weekend, or thought that it might have erupted over the weekend, that they wasn't sure. So it's all interesting things. Right, Jackie.
Through the chair, I do just want to acknowledge your points, and I will take that feedback back.
And will you convey them to the minister?
Which we have already done, by the way, on many occasions. Yes. All of the ministers we've had time with.
Yeah, but there is significant frustration in local government about Wellington thinking they know it all and ignoring the wealth of experience and knowledge there is locally in New Zealand. Yeah.
I was say that, I think we know in our own work program that the second year of our triennium is kind of the bigger year, long-term plan and all those sort of things. But unfortunately, our third year, when things are changing, is the second year for the government. And I suspect it's quite the same. Yes. So there's that misalignment with actually.
Yeah, okay. Right, I'm going to move the receipt of report. Seconder?
Yes.
fight it out. Mayor, isn't there? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Right, update director, emergency management, Mayor Plenty, that must be you.
Last time I checked, thank you. Thank you, committee members. I'd like to take this opportunity, given it's the last meeting of this biennium, and as director and working with this committee for the last 3 years, I've also been around a long time, but we're looking at the triennium, is just to reflect on some of the highlights, because I think sometimes we are very good at saying what's working, not going on. Sometimes we need to just stop and look back at where we've come. So if you'll permit me, my staff have done a great job of putting together some highlights, which we will circulate. Not to worry, I won't read everything, but I just like to flag some of these things. Events. We haven't put every event, we put all the significant ones. We have Whakaari eruption in 2019. We have COVID response from 2020 still for years. The March 5th tsunami event we've talked about. Those are the 3 unprecedented earthquakes in 21. And then recently we had the East Coast roading event, which was an interesting one because there's still questions, was that actually a CDM thing or was it a road maintenance thing? But it became an issue. So we've had events that have impacted our group significantly. Touching on some of those, the COVID response, no need to dwell into that. I just picked out key points for me was that this was a very long, significant commitment across the group, but nationally, internationally. So it was huge. Unfortunately, that word unprecedented keeps getting overused now. Every time something new pops up, it's again unprecedented. To me, signals another worry about where we're going.
Yes.
The other thing through that event, we strengthened relationships, we tested things, we invented new things, we're innovative. This group also acknowledged our staff commitment. We gave COVID service medals and certificates. The chair supported that going around, which I think is another step forward. We don't do that very well all the time. We just seem to go from one event to the next, and it starts to feel like a blur. So no, that had its own lessons. For Whakaari, we won't talk too much about, given obviously its legal and regulatory complexity in the court cases. But it was a major multi-agency response with an international, again, expectations, given the tragic events of that day. And I'm sure we'll still have a lot to go out. Want to acknowledge, though, again, the key role played by Ngāti Awa in that event through the Whakaari event. And I think we will still hear a lot more around this going forward because of the court cases. Not only did obviously Ngāti Awa played a key role, but the National Emergency Management Agency last year introduced a new award from Ngāti Tanga, and it was the first ever time it was put forward, and Ngāti Awa won that award for their work they did in the Whakaari White Island eruption. And a couple of weeks back, I was at a hui in Wellington for 2 days where Ngāti Awa spoke to their experiences, which was quite moving for all those in the room. And I think a lot of eyes were opened. There were actually comments around we didn't appreciate, we didn't understand, it was language we heard. So it was good for that to be shared and to see. And again, as leading, Ngāti Awa is leading in the space. The tsunami event, I won't go too much into that because you've heard about, you're hearing it all the time. That's what gave rise to us creating the role that Mel's in at the moment. She's leading our readiness. Again, you see the unprecedented expression used by everyone. 3 separate quakes causing tsunami risk. And we were at a presentation recently where the scientists talked about that and experts said, oh, if someone told them to write the exercise for this, they would never write 3 things happening one after the other because it's unheard of.
Yes.
Well, again, my worry in emergency management is we're moving into that space where everyone thinks it will never happen.
Yes.
The history of pandemics is that they supposedly happen about once every 100 years. That is the time space we get. But yeah.
And that's a valid point. I think even the language we're using when we're trying to describe events as 1 in 100 years or 1 in you're having 3 in like 6 months.
Yes.
3 in 1 day, suddenly it throws that whole, you go, well, the explanation's a little bit off the mark.
But we are the centre of national emergencies, aren't we? have more than anybody else.
Yeah, we have we were explained hazard scale for the Bay of Plenty is we've got about just every hazard possible. I think the only one we don't have is snow, unless someone can correct me. Snow is a problem. South get the snow problem. We don't
count.
Jinxed us for the next unprecedented. Deployments. I think it's also key to remind us that it's not just our patch that we're looking after. We are part of New Zealand, and our staff have been working hard. So those previous significant events, you think, oh, there's only a few, but they are long, they're complex. They're actually very demanding on staff. A lot of trauma, a lot of things to deal with. And in between, we've deployed staff to Westport floods in 21, Tauranga floods in 21, Westcote weather event 22, Nelson flood, Tasman floods 22, and Marlborough floods in 22. So they're just some numbers there where we've supported regions outside of the Bay of Plenty.
Is that just your organisation?
No, I'll move on. That's primarily our deployments of what I call first responders is from MBOB.
Yes.
And then next ones are the emergency management career staff at your councils.
Yes.
And then after that, we go to what's called surge capacity. That's where we will reach out further to council staff who have roles in an EOC or ECC. We are we do vet that quite stringently because you can imagine it's one thing having staff in our patch where we can look after them. But if we're sending them out, especially where you see one going, we want to make sure those people are well experienced, well qualified to be able to go into those unknown environments because it's not their home patch. And we often get staff coming back saying, well, they do things differently. And that's emergency management. Just picking on one, there's Westport that will highlight. There was 150 national responders deployed, ran for 3 weeks, so the whole country supported that one. And there you can see staff were deployed from Tauranga City Council, Western Bay District Council, Regional Council, and MBOB. So we drew across our collective for that one. Nelson Tasman, equally significant flooding, road issues there. More than 600 homes evacuated. Again, staff were drawn from Regional Council, Tauranga City, and Emergency Management Bay of Plenty. Just to paint a picture though, there's an emergency management staff member, Megan Edhouse, who does support Kara on the Podiki. So we could, every time we say we deploy Megan, she's actually going for 3 of us. But she's deploying as emergency management Bay of Plenty.
Yes.
Growth in the Bay of Plenty, emergency management. That's just to talk a little bit about how we've developed over time. And I think the main thing I want to point out there, since our partnership agreement in 2019, which I believe was one of the major steps forward, where we looked to get clarification around what is our collective responsibility versus our individual responsibilities.
Just wondering with that too, Eastern Bay of Plenty is now moved from Stats New Zealand describing us as a region in decline and to get over ourselves to a surge region, and so that's going to shift the numbers a little bit. That doesn't in any way integrate what the West needs, that Western Bay of Plenty needs, but just to be aware that over the next 10 years, growth will be part of what has to be factored in.
And I think that's equally as we've got stats here, 33 emergency management positions across the group. That's not just in my team, that's at the various councils as well, what we count as the career staff. And my prediction is that needs to grow. We keep talking about how many events are coming, how much work we have to do, but it's actually a very, very small team trying to drive and lead that. While we do get support from councils, the wider workforce, most of those staff are hired or appointed for their day jobs. So every time we try and use them for emergency management, they've got to stop doing their day job to do their job. So we sort of moving the deck chairs all the time instead of investing. But we have made good strides forward in that one. Our people, just some highlights there. Again, the New Zealand Emergency Management Assistance Team, that's one of the TAG recommendations was formed. We have 5 staff from Emergency Management Bay of Plenty on that national response. And that's interesting too, because a number of these events, when we get the call to activate, it's often a couple of my staff being asked to deploy as a national team. not as Emergency Bay Plenty, so they double hat. So we still count that we're going.
Absolutely.
So we got 5 there. Good workshop, photoshopping by the staff because we had 6, but the 3 left us, so you can see why they're split in photos. We photoshopped them out because we didn't have another photo. Equally, three team members, myself, Lisa Glass, and Megan Edhouse hold international certifications in emergency management now, which I think is outstanding. We've got at least 10 others currently in progress doing the exam, and that's not just in Emergency Management Bay Plenty, it's also at the local councils. So we're working as a complete unit of emergency management practitioners. Our goal is to get all those 33 up with international certifications.
Wow. Fantastic.
Planning highlights, just a couple of I'll pick out. We've got now a full-time recovery specialist role, Julian Ruetti, who works in MBOP in the recovery space and is doing fantastic there, so much so that he's one of those, the Tarafiti deployment where we said we sent one, it was actually him. Because they didn't need our help with the response, but they needed help with recovery. So we've seen that as well now, where we're supporting people in the recovery phase. The full-time roles in Army readiness, we've talked about already. And the key one I'll just pick out which is really giving me confidence, is the work that Tauranga City Council is doing in the Major Hazard Project. You know, those major hazard facilities in the port area, to see the attention being paid there, and we'll be bringing something to this committee in the future around that. But that's really great. Again, it's showing us not everything has to be done by Emergency Management Bay Plenty. We work as a collective. The locals can lead projects as well with our support. Highlights with iwi Maori engagement. I think the main thing I want to stress here is that over these 3 years, we've seen a lot of work done nationally, regionally, and locally. It's not one or the other, it's the collective. For example, I'll pick out the Hui Amotu. It was a 2-day national Hui run by the National Emergency Management Agency down in Wellington. The chairman was there as well for those 2 days, where a lot of our iwi were there as well, our practitioners were there, and that was really good dialogue where iwi gave their feedback on what they expect from the system. Not just Bay of Plenty, not just Whakatane, but the system of New Zealand. So there's a lot of work, and it's ongoing both at the national level, work at the regional level led by Stace, and working with your teams locally. The other one I'll just highlight is the memorandum of understanding with Maori Wardens we signed off. We again leading. I was at a couple of weeks ago, Maori Wardens were there, and they spoke to their concerns around not being recognised in the system. Again, we're leading because we've recognised them. They're on board with us. Just operational highlights. The key things there I'll just point out operationally is we now have an emergency management centre, thanks to the regional council officers. It's not fully operational as there's quite a few technology issues missing, and blame still on COVID, delays in supplies from overseas, but it's working in terms of offering training, home for the staff to sit, and we've done our usual workaround on some of those issues. We've also been increasing our deployable capability. We have a CoverTex deployable system, which has been rolled out and trained and been offered to others. So the bottom right-hand corner there, the picture is the situation room in the new centre where you can see staff are monitoring events. So if something's happening, they are able to monitor across New Zealand. In fact, at one stage, they were monitoring the deployment West Coast, tracking our staff down there. They were monitoring Northlands situation developing. We were even monitoring FENZ's industrial action, because that impacts service delivery if the fire guys are put down tools for us. Capability highlights that's developing. Key ones I'll just point out there is we had over 600 course attendees, so 600 people attended our courses, and the best of that was that a lot of that was despite the COVID. COVID cancelled a lot of our stuff, it cancelled a lot of face-to-face stuff, yet we've still managed to put through 600 people through courses, various ones. And the other two highlights were we also ran 2 major regional exercises in 2019 and 22. That was for the group centre and all the local centres. So we run the exercises now that we all play in those things. Communication highlights, as said previously, we have a full-time communications member in the Group Emergency Management Office, or MBOB, and that's Lisa Glass. We heard comments already around Lisa's success on deployments. She's one of the national response team members. In fact, the other issue I'm having with Lisa now, she's so sought after, you can see the one comment, she's been invited to Rafati, Waikato and Taranaki to go and help train their people. So again, the Bay is leading in this avenue where other groups are reaching out to us for not just help them with the response, but help them train and get prepared for stuff. So that's massive. So I like there too. We also, the group won the 2020 Empire Award for Excellence in Recovery Communications for their constant party. So that was a great initiative. And the major tsunami maps, we've already had a brief on milestones. Community engagement. There was too much to pull in here, except to say that across all the local authorities and our team, we are ongoing. We're engaging with schools, marae, restaurants, businesses, school, cultural groups, partner organisations, community events. This is just an ongoing business activity that was discussed around here. It's one thing to have the plans, it's around how the community are going to behave. And education is important with that.
Can I just thinking about our work with iwi, and clearly things like marae opportunities for setting up stations is great. But actually, particularly in our town, it's virtually 50-50 Māori Pākehā now population, and just in terms of investing in leadership for crises, key. Like he's recommended people, I think going forward is also going to be really important in terms of navigating all the different parts of our community that need support. They've already been happening, but I just think that's a really, beyond just facilities, because they're great at hosting. We're beyond that, reaching out to their own people and using their local knowledge could be really a step to be taken in that journey.
Yes, no, fully supported, and work, you're quite right, work is underway, especially around empowering iwi to be partners. Right. Yeah. So we are looking at programs of work. I'm also aware of one, I forget, Stace might remind me, one of our iwi leaders here in the Bay Plenty recently established a response and recovery leadership program, which is part of what all our informers and recovery managers attend. So we are looking at opportunities where we can empower iwi leaders to be part of that response. I can see Stacey's thinking hard, but the name escapes me at the moment. And that's just, again, we could fill this with, I think that the main message there is rest assured the staff are out ongoing, engaging, and a lot of that is even ever available forum, because it's best to talk to those who are willing, who want to hear the message, while we're still trying to tackle those who are trying to avoid the message. As I draw to a close, Resilience Fund, I just highlight on that over the 3 years, we drew down $253,000 worth of national funding in projects that we applied for and were granted, and there's quite a range of them. The only one I'll flag, the Recovery and Management Navigators Guide for $40,000, we actually produced that guide with, and we didn't use any of the money for it. So the team managed to deliver that one in-house, and which has been publicized across New Zealand. And when many other groups have already approached us and said, can we copy yours? And we said, with pride, just do an acknowledgement. So they are doing that for us as well. Challenges, not to end on a negative note, but just challenges going forward. We've got legislative reviews, which we've talked about. We've got, it's not just the emergency management system. What's the future of local government look like? 3 waters, just to pick on 3, not everything. The ongoing legal aspects of Whakaari, what will that mean for emergency management? We've got a challenge in my mind for sector fatigue. We are constantly doing responses, but then we're constantly expected to deliver our work programs. So that's a key thing that worries me. Implementation of our new group plan we talked about. We've extended the timeline, but that's going to have to carry on. Climate change and the increasing events that are happening. We're also concerned around increasing misinformation and disinformation and trust in government. So every time we're trying to do something, there's people putting out stuff contrary to that. Looking at appropriate support and working partnership with iwi, hapu and marae. Population growth and diversity, as Judy Turner just mentioned. If we are growing, are our resources growing to meet those needs? More people to look after, more people to educate, more people to evacuate. And I would expect that we also get smart about where the growth happens.
Exactly, spatial planning.
Yeah, spatial planning. Let's not put people in harm's way and then expect emergency managers to go and save them. Let's not put them in a danger place in the first. So those are just some of the challenges we'll be taking forward and speaking to the new committee about, but thank you for the time to just give you a bit of a highlights tour and remind us where we came. And from myself and all the staff, just to thank you all around this table for your support over the 3 years. Thank you very much.
I think it's appropriate for me as the chair to reflect on your report. When I first came into local government 9 years ago, I think civil defence was one man and a dog, and I'm not quite sure the dog was very able. It's grown exponentially over the time. And instead of becoming a minor irritation for us, it has become one of the mainstreams of what councils have to do and what to think about. And I've noticed myself on this particular forum, that especially since we had the event where Tony Bond was really taken to task in Whakatane, that the mayors themselves are paying far more regard to this area than they have done in the past, and I'm delighted to see that. One thing which I am so impressed and so in awe is the staff we have. The staff have done a tremendous job. And I'm not just talking about those under your direct control, Clinton, but also the CD staff right across the Bay of Plenty, all of whom chip in and all who do the 100%. They are always willing to exceed what is expected of them. And I just want you to pass on my thank you to them for what they are doing, what they are achieving, and their continued high regard for what they need to do. And indeed, I am going to move the receipt of the report on 8.8. I'll give you a comment before I do so. But I want to add a second recommendation, and I'll give you it afterwards, Marinda. Thank and congratulate all the staff for their outstanding work and responses to events over this triennium. Would anybody else like to comment?
Oh, no, absolutely. You know, we've had more than our fair share, and it's, you know, we couldn't do it without you. We need to understand what the constantly improve how we partner, management and those matters, and particularly in the crisis phase, I think is no matter how well prepared you are, there's no two emergencies that are quite the same mirror view of what you planned for. So I'm really impressed with where emergency services are looking. I think it's fantastic. Long may it continue, because I'm, you know, look at what's happening around the world and realize how we're still in the fortunate brand, but like, you know, I don't know how long that can last for. And so, you know, really grateful for that. And, you know, I think also we need to start thinking, make sure that we are, for those going who end up in the next trainee, just looking at making sure that the elected people are doing some educative work and standing up in situations. But no, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate everything you do. The reports that you give, fabulous.
Marista.
Yes, I just wanted to add my personal thanks on behalf of the Opotiki district. So 2 weeks after our last CDEM meeting, the State Highway 35 incident happened. And but I particularly want to acknowledge your agility in thinking around what was happening and actually preparing for it in advance. And I'm talking about the fact that we were able to get some funding to get supplies into the area before the road dropped away completely, which it did, more or less. And your work, particularly your negotiation and work between central government on our behalf, yourself and Gerard, I thought was fantastic. Thinking outside the square and doing what needed to be done and doing what was right. I really appreciate that. So that's a thank you from us. And just looking at the amount of work that's been done over this last triennium, I'm thinking that for ourselves, we may need to go back and start looking at increasing our capability in this area. I think we are probably underdone, and if we are looking at the way that our next years for us in New Zealand are going, well, I think we all may need to do that.
Thank you for those comments, and thank you for that observation at the end, which I fully support. Any further comments from around the table?
You're not going to get away without me. Chair, can I just say, on behalf of Kawerau District, but the whole of the Bay of Plenty region, a big thank you to Clinton. He's brought a professionalism into the job, which we didn't have. We were woefully behind the 8 ball, and we knew that. And he's brought us into the right realm that we should be. Far too often, emergencies would happen and then they'd just die away and nothing would be ever done until the next one come along. But however, with climate change, it is blaringly obvious that it is coming down the track. And with what we saw in Marlborough and Nelson last week or the week before, it's just incomparable to think of a metre of rain landing in this patch here. We've got significant rivers up behind us, but then it's going to get dry. And that really worries me as somebody up in the Kawerau District, right in the midst of a plantation forest that could really have some significant issues as far as wildfires go. And we saw that down in Ohio last 2 years or 3 years ago, and in Tasman District. So those are the sort of things that really, emergency is here, and climate change is here. It's not something that we've been talking about it for years. Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you, your staff. And as I say, your professionalism is explanatory. It's been an absolute pleasure working beside you, to be honest. And I know that I've seen you under pressure before. And sometimes it's a hard call when you've got to call for an emergency, and all the naysayers are it's not. I just hope that the mayors in the future will always stand by you and give you that support that you need. So thank you very much on behalf of the Kawerau District, but more than anything, the whole of the Bay of Plenty, Clinton. So well done, well done.
Yeah, thank you. And my comments too are towards Clinton, as you know full well. I don't believe it's the role of a mayor to declare an emergency, because in many instances we're so far away we don't know what's going on. And I think you epitomise why I believe that the people at the coalface, such as yourself, you're in the best space to make those hard calls. And your professionalism is what I fall back to, that if there was a few more Clinton Nords around New Zealand, we'd be better to leave it to you to get on with it, because you're professionally trained to manage it. And I think you do a superb job. So as a fellow who you're not going to have to worry about anymore, I wish you all the very best. You've done a superb job for our region. Thank you.
Well done, Gary.
Okay, any other comment? Sorry, Commissioner Wasley, Bill.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to repeat. I support the comments made in terms of Clinton and the team. And also, in particular, the comments that Mayor Gary has just made, and sort of my brief foray into emergency management. Would really like to reiterate, Clinton, in terms of your professionalism and focus, and actually cutting to the chase. So yeah, really wish to acknowledge that. But the other thing I'd just like to acknowledge, while I've got the floor, I'd just like to acknowledge all of those who have thrown their hat in for the pending election. Best wishes for all of that, and certainly also acknowledging the work and commitment of those mayors who are retiring from that role, in terms of Malcolm, Gary and Steve. So I just wanted to acknowledge on behalf of the Commission, because we're not having to worry about the election in October, but I did want to acknowledge the work that's been done over a long period of time from those mayors. So, but otherwise, best wishes for those early October who are standing.
Thank you for that, Phil.
Thank you for that. I think that rounds up everybody. Yeah, I've moved the recommendation and the second recommendation, which I've given you, and that will be in the minutes. Does anybody want me to read that out again, or are you you're happy with it? Okay, it's been moved, it's been seconded, and it really goes forward, I think, with a tremendous great tick in the box, hopefully. Also, all those in favour say aye now.
Aye.
Right. Right. Almost the last item on the agenda is we have to confirm the minutes of the public excluded from the last meeting or not. Unless there are any comments on it, I don't actually need to go into public excluded, or so. Does anybody wish to comment on those? Okay, right. I'm therefore not going for any public excluded. I'm just going to confirm that the Bay of Plenty Regional Council Committee of the 8th of July is a true and correct record. All those seconded. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. No business to be transferred into the open. Consideration of items not on the agenda. There are none. The date of the next meeting, we are all here, is the 16th of December. I do, of course, note that in addition to the Commissioner, the one person we know will be here is, of course, Fayley.
Yes, he is.
Who has been returned as the sole candidate. So we do at least have some continuity.
No precious.
Okay, so now it's really just for me to wrap up. And as Bill has already said, we're saying goodbye to a number of people who have made a significant contribution to the Bay of Plenty in this and in other areas. I'm sorry that Steve Chadwick couldn't be with us today for us to thank her for all she has done and the difficult time she has faced in this triennium. It really has been a nightmare for Rotorua, dealing with the homeless as it's transpired during the COVID crisis. And we wish her all the best in her retirement. Similarly, Mayor Webber has made, another person who's made a significant contribution over the years to the Bay of Plenty in various guises. And we wish him all the best in his retirement. And to clean out from Rotorua, of course, Deputy Mayor David Donaldson, and I'm not quite sure whether he's still on the screen. Oh, he's just left. Well, if we can just let him know that we've also expressed our best wishes. And personally, I'm not sure whether there's a number of ifs and buts about whether I return to this committee or not. It depends on who gets elected as our chairman. It depends on whether I get re-elected. It depends on whether people want me or not. But I just want to thank you all for the way you have worked with me on this committee. I think it's one of the committees where we've had consensus right across the board. And it's been great to work with you, and I thank you for your efforts on my behalf. One person I've left out of the thank you and the goodbyes is, of course, Mayor Campbell. But I think I might not be saying goodbye to him. Well, I might be if I don't get re-elected. But Malcolm, you're again, was it 23 years?
21 as mayor.
21, of course it would be 20, it had to be a multiple of 3. 21 as mayor. And you've always been really supportive of this group. You've not been subjected to tsunamis where you are, of course, but you've suffered from them because, of course, everybody's evacuated to you. So, you know, these things affect all of us. So, and the very last person I want to thank is Marinda. Marinda, it keeps me honest. And she's been so good to me all the way throughout. She's so good at providing agendas, in being gently guiding me onto when I've got it all wrong. And everything she's done on behalf of myself and behalf of the group. So Marinda, personally, and behalf of the group, I just want to say thank you. And I look forward to the group continuing to have your good officers in the future. With that,
So, Chair?
Yes.
One thing, I'm going to take the liberty to speak on behalf of all the mayors of the region. We need to thank you for your leadership around the table, and it's been an absolute pleasure working beside you. And I just hope that Gary, you might want to say something nice. But it has. It's been, you know, you've had that professional approach too. So. So thank you very much for all the services you've done for the regional, for the whole region, not just us here in the Eastern Bay.
Thank you for that. I hesitate to ask if anybody else wants to comment. No, with that, can I just say lunch is now served, and thank you all so much for everything you've done over these last 3 years. And thank you to the staff. You've heard my words. Please make sure they are passed on to the rest of the staff as well. I really do. Thank you. Right, we're finished.
Well, nice.